I'm Aman. I'm a fifth-year student from Department of Humanities and Social Sciences. All right, so we have been waiting for some time, so let's get to the going. So in our classrooms, we are often taught that problems, they are designed to converge in some equilibrium, right? And we work with complete data sets, we clear the assumptions, and we know that if we get stuck, there will be a precise solution which is usually waiting for us in the appendix. But as many of us we eventually find out, the real world doesn't really always follow a script. The careers, the markets, and the teams outside, they are a little bit chaotic. The information is incomplete, and the appendix, it simply doesn't exist. So this brings us to the question that we are going to ponder upon today. How do we apply the rigid first principles of engineering to a world that is inherently unsettled? And how do we transform this pure ambiguity into a strategic advantage? So to explore these questions, we are delighted to have with us Mr. Vittal sir today. He's a Chief Executive Officer for the Americas at Marex and a proud alumnus of IIT Madras. So let's talk a little about him. So Mr. Vittal, he is a Chief Executive Officer for the Americas at Marex, based in New York, where he leads the firm across the United States, Canada, and South America. He is trained originally as a mechanical engineer. He has built a global career across financial services, including senior leadership roles at JPMorgan and Goldman Sachs, where he helped establish Goldman's asset management presence in India. So Mr. Ram, sir, he holds an MBA from the Wharton School, an MS from the Ohio State University, and a BTech from here, of course, IIT Madras. And currently he serves on the National Board of Minds Matter, supporting college access for high-achieving students from economically disadvantaged backgrounds. He was previously the chair of the Board of Overseers of Columbia University School of Professional Studies as well. So today, he will be speaking on from solving equilibrium equations to navigating market mayhem, the first principles to lead an unsettled world. So in this session, he will also reflect on the nonlinear journey from engineering to finance and engage us in a conversation, and thereby leveraging a strong educational foundation to navigate a very volatile and uncertain world. So we welcome you, sir, over here. And with this, we also request Kaviraj, sir, the CEO of the Office of Institutional Advancement, if he could please come and present a memento to sir, please.
My name is Ram, and I already had the introduction. Just by show of hands, how many of you are from the engineering program here? Okay. How many of you, oh, can I just put it here? Okay, so it's a handful of management studies. Okay, so I'll try to make it relevant to the management studies people, but I'm probably going to be a little bit more engineering oriented. But I have to be a little bit careful in saying that because I walk in, and I meet Rahul for the first time, and he says stochastic.
Can I just add it? They're all from engineering background.
But QFR. I got it. Okay, so everybody is an engineer here. So he says stochastic. Then Mahesh walks in and says vector calculus. And then I look at the topic, I'm like, wait, what did I do to myself? Writing a topic like that going into IIT Madras. Now, just by way of show of hands, all of you took JE to get into IIT, some way, shape, or form. Is that fair? How many of you would pass the JE 1 year after you got in? How many of you are confident? If you took the JE 1 year after, you would still get into ITU? Okay, this is actually a more 2 years after. Okay, that shows down. 3 years after? Sorry? Different branch. Okay, so you won't be. Okay, there is some realism here. I think when I was studying at IIT Madras, generally the notion was 1 year after you clear JE, if you go back and take again, you may not get into it. So that is at least the notion with which we all operated. And in some interesting ways, that's a precursor for, I think, what happens in your whole career. So you come into IIT, you study at IIT, anyone, by whoever show up, and what do you think this IIT education is all about? Like, what does it really, what is the value of this? You worked hard through your high school years, you were studying when everybody else was partying, doing whatever they were doing. You got into IIT, you have 4 years, 5 years, how many ever years you commit. What is really your expectation coming out of that? Anyone. You can't go wrong. The only person who can give wrong answers is me. Are you a student? Are you a faculty? Okay, so it's a legacy that you carry afterwards. Okay. Advantage in what sense? Do you think in the long arch of life, the people that went to IIT Madras are inevitably going to be ahead of anyone else who comes from any other stream? Okay, so your notion is it's going to put you at an advantage over the others.
I think I like this place as kind of mini India. Basically, you get to explore a lot at one place in these 4 years.
That's actually a brilliant point. I grew up in Chennai my whole life. I went to a school called Padma Seshadri Balabhavan. How many of you know about this school? Okay, it is called PSBB, right? Do you know what the nickname was for that? Did you guys know that? You know that. You seem to have a smile, no? No? You know what the nickname was? Am I allowed to say some bad words? Okay, fine. We used to be called the piss babies. PSBB, we were called the piss babies. So, growing up in Chennai, I had a very good school environment, many people from many walks, but to your point, IIT just was amazing for me because like I graduated in 94. I entered IIT in 1990. And you can literally see people from different parts of the country come here. I remember this, my closest friend happens to be somebody who grew up in Patan in Satara district in Maharashtra and who came to Chennai because he wanted to, at that time it used to be called Madras. He came to Madras because he really wanted to improve his English, which he thought he had a better shot at doing by coming here than anyone else. But that point about that group of people, I want to come back to that point in another point in this conversation. By the way, how many of you think I'm very prepared for this conversation? Show of hands. Okay. Okay, this is the first part where your probabilistic assessment is horrendously bad. So whatever probabilistic stochastic model you have, I am in the chaotic school of organization. A big part of my performance today is inevitably going to depend on how each of you is going to be like engaging me, challenging me. Don't challenge me too hard. I did my JE like 36 years ago at this point. So go easy on me. But the more interactive we make it, the better it is. Who has a time constraint? Who has to leave? What is the latest you guys can stick around? 6 p.m. What is the time? 6:30. I don't know. I'm here. If I can get an audience like this to talk, I can talk. So you guys have to. You know what? You three guys, right? If you kind of feel it's getting boring, do this. Okay? That way I'll know. I'll get the cues. The three of you. I'm not going for 4 because if 2 of you do it, then it becomes a bind. I need a majority view. And that way when you do it, nobody else will be able to see it. So it's only between us, right? This. Okay, so at some point just keep giving me feedback. This means good, this means cut it off, right? These three guys there. So I'm really here to be open with you and talk to you about life's experiences. Look, what separates you from me? What separates any of you from me? Yeah, experience pretty much, that's it. You guys are probably just as intelligent, more intelligent, less intelligent, whatever. You guys are as motivated as I am. All I've had more than you is 30 years of experience, very beautifully hidden by an amazing hair dye product, ammonia free, right? So that's effectively what separates us. I'm sure that in 30 years time, maybe even much sooner than that, many of you will have your own experiences to come and present to a group of people like that. We all chart our own pathways. There is no one correct pathway. It's all about what is your sum total experience. So that's really what I'm here to share with, not to preach. I certainly do not have a template of this is a manual for success. If I said that to you, you should not listen to me anyway, or anyone else for that matter. I've seen a few other things. Everybody will tell you you should be hardworking, you should be intellectually curious, you should be this, you should be that. I'm not going to, I hope I don't have to tell you any of those things. So that's really how I am thinking about this. So what would be helpful? Like, what's a good way to start this conversation? What would be any thoughts on what I should start talking about? Anything that intrigues?
How you started at IITM?
How I started IITM. I got ragged. Do they allow ragging these days? No, right? I think that's a big mistake. Mahesh will agree with me. It's a big mistake that I think the ragging actually, like when I was in IIT, that is when many things transitioned to something else. Do you guys know what Mardi Gras is? It's sarang. It became sarang in my final year. We were all like very, very sad to call Mardi Gras sarang, right? But we actually had a pretty, I got ragged, and everybody in my year got ragged. It was actually pretty cool if you think about it. It created good bonds. Some of them were unsavory and not too many of those, thankfully, which happened in my year. My year was the pivot away from a much harder. Do you still have GCU guidance and counseling unit? So they became a lot tougher. So, but you have to also talk about things like, for instance, I remember one of my things was, is there something called nothing? I remember that as a topic to go for a while, and it was good fun. But I joined IIT in 1990. I was in Godavari. Anyone from Godav? There you go. There's the group of people. We had like one computer in my final year for the whole hostel. There was no computer for everyone at all. There was one security guy who stood in the entrance, and if you got a call, it would be like 254, right? And if you heard it, you could run down and take the call. Otherwise, and if you're in the room with your door closed, you depend on a friend to come and knock on the door to tell you, and if there is nobody there, you miss the call, right? And then we had to go to Tarams. Is there still something called Tarams? Do you have that Shanmugam that sells a 2 rupees chai? No, it's not 2 rupees. So we used to have like that whole ecosystem. But look at your lives now, right? You have like, everyone has an iPhone, some smartphone. Sorry, it was, so see, that was so well timed. Sometimes you need to carry 2 smartphones. Do you guys have wing cots, by the way? Do you guys have conversations in the evenings with the wing cots? You guys do that? Wing cot. That used to be the center of activity for us. Every evening around this time, every floor had a wing cot. We would have newspapers. Do you guys know there used to be things called newspapers printed on paper? So the papers are all there. One copy of Indian Express and the Hindu. Maybe the Times of India, I'm not sure. And everybody would converge around that. Evenings, 5:30, 6 p.m., everybody would be sitting. You don't have a phone, you don't have Google, you don't have any web. All you got to do is you have to talk to each other, right? How scary is that as a thought sometimes? No LinkedIn. How many of you are on LinkedIn? I got several invitations to join. How many of you are on WhatsApp? Everybody, right? None of that. One computer for all of us to type our final thesis. No smartphones. Lot more human connectivity. Whose lives do you think is easier, yours or the way that, or my life? Which do you think was easier? Mine. I think so too. I think so too. Why is your life so challenging? Expectation. Why are expectations more? More resources, but what else is happening? No human connection, but what else is happening? Distraction. Then what else? There is one thing that's going on. Sorry? Say again? Isolation. I don't want to now start becoming very melancholic, depressed, but there is something else that goes on. What about comparison? I'm actually trying to pull up something very cool that I saw. Like how when you look at something on Instagram, and I'm trying to pull this up, everybody is having a good life. You're the only sucker who's like struggling, right? When you looked at LinkedIn, everybody is a success story. You're the only loser who has completely underperformed, right? And so I didn't have to deal with any of that. I was blissfully in my own lane, in my own world. So I think the expectation game was much, much simpler, easier. And there's actually a pretty interesting thing that says the dog, like it came today. Let me pull it up. I should have actually saved it. Yeah, I barked at the neighbor's dog. And then like that's like how we would talk. And today on LinkedIn it's something like, I was like guarding my thing, and I saw this other animal that showed up, and I expressed my courage by doing this, by expressing my dissent about it. And over the next few years, I hope to scale this operation and be of even more service to the people that are like, and like currently my employers. And I hope to extend this and become a full-scale profitable operation. So that's like how the world works. So it's a very complicated world like that, right? So you have to play the comparison game, the expectation game. We were much, much easier. But I'll tell you something, right? I think the key thing to remember is whatever world you operate in, the key frame is like just like getting into JEE gets you into IIT, and then you realize what you studied at IIT for JEE does not really what gets you out of IIT. The same thing happens. You can play this comparison game, you can play all these things, but if you stay anchored on what it is that motivates you, that drives you, that is going to be very, very sustaining in the long run. I'm getting bored of myself already. So are you guys okay? So what else? What is that? So that was like my life was much simpler compared to what you guys had. We had messes in every hostel. You guys have a central common mess, I'm told. Do you guys get rava dosas? Which day? Saturday mornings? That was the highlight of our week. I used to be in Godab, but I lived in Chennai. I would never leave the hostel until I got my rava dosa on Saturday morning. Custard on Friday evening, still a thing? No? Do you guys get custard, fruit custard? Okay, so some things have not changed. Does that answer your question? Pretty much? Okay. Any other questions?
Could you tell us about how you transitioned from a mechanical engineer into an analyst?
Sure. So I did my undergrad engineering, mechanical engineering, and then I went and did my master's also in mechanical engineering, focusing on heat transfer thermodynamics, which is what I studied, loved it. Worked for an engineering firm that makes compressors, variable speed compressors, which is basically, depending on the outside environment, inside environment, you are able to design a compressor that operates from 28 to 100 hertz, right? Whatever be the speed. Got some nice patents, really had some good inventions, loved all that. I even have an oil named after me, by the way. 42 centi-Stokes hydraulically stable polyol ester -RV. Do you know why I have that oil named after me? Any guesses? I wish. All that happened was when I placed the order for the oil with incremental sulfur, so it is more corrosion resistant, the technician just put my name RV, and then it just stuck on, simply based on that. And it became a DuPont marketed oil for a little time. Like this was in the 90s, so like, sometimes when you get credit, you just take it. Don't ask. That's an important life lesson, by the way. If somebody gives you credit, don't ask why. So I did that. I had a really good time. But then anytime I had a new product, right, my product plan would be like, oh, the IRR is not good, the ROI is not good. All these 3-letter acronyms that was my enemy. So I signed up in a local community college while I was working as an engineer to learn some more finance, accounting, all of those. And then I said, you know what, I need to do more than that. And so I applied to business school. I went to Wharton. And when you go into Wharton, like that's when I realized that there is something called investment banking. I never knew about it until I went to Wharton. So then I really thought it was a very cool way to apply. Now, the key thing, another thing happened to me. One of my all-know-it Indian friends said, oh, you're an engineer and you have an MBA, so the only thing you can do is consulting. You can't do banking. And he actually went one step further and he said, you will not survive banking because you don't have the personality. You're too nice a guy. You won't survive banking. Banking is only for a certain type of people. It's only for white people. It's not for you. All these things. And to be fair, I did interview with consulting firms. I did interview with investment banks. And I actually told myself, you know what, if consulting is my defined pattern, why don't I go try banking? And it's interestingly about analyzing companies. It's about doing non-private transactions. So I was curious. So that to me was my first risk I took by going away from something that I would easily be naturally aligned with to something where people would pretty much come and tell me, oh, you're not the best suited for that. Thankfully, the system was more meritocratic. It embraces people with values. And then when I went into my internship, that was in 2001. It was a summer internship of 2001. You know what followed that summer internship, right? Any takers? Sorry? BPO? No. What happened like after the summer of 2001? 9/11. So when 9/11 happened, it literally froze the markets. The job market went from bad to absolutely terrible, non-existent. But there were 6 interns in my group, and they said they'll give only one person the offer. I was not a citizen. I didn't have any green card, nothing. And I still got the offer, the opportunity to go full time. And then subsequent to that, even to this date, I've been in finance in one way, shape, or form. And I pretty much navigated all different, I started in investment banking, went into asset management, and now I'm more on the markets side of the house. So, key point I'll make there is, don't let others define you. Just because you're, and always believe in meritocracy. If you're a good talent, you're going to find an opportunity. So, like to kind of get caught up in, this process was unfair, is a waste of energy. There is 10 other opportunities that you can bid for. And at the end of the day, how many jobs do you need? You need one job, right? So I find too many people getting caught up in the fairness, the unfairness of everything. That's like a prophecy for the idle minds. You need one job and focus on it and get it. And like the number of interviews I would go up to the final round, and then you get denied. It's very disheartening. And especially when you are in the business program, at what it all happens in a 3-day period. You keep going, you're all enthusiastic, and then deny. So you have to have that resiliency always to get beyond that. So that's how I got into Wall Street. I did not even know what Wall Street was until a month after I joined Water and applied. And then, the rest of it, as they say, you just work hard, you commit yourself, life just carries you well. None of this yet, right? When you guys start moving your hands a little bit, I start getting worried already. So
I'm assuming that you went to US when you were in 20s probably. So you went to US.
yes, I was in the 20s.
So how did you set up your world around there? You were new there, and how did you create your ecosystem to thrive on, and finally you did
Yeah, and so this is where the comment you made previously is a natural answer. So in IIT, you all think that your education happens in the classrooms, in the coursework, in the classrooms. But think about one of the best things that I took away from IIT was, you are all competing. Is it still RGPA, relative grades? So effectively at some level, your grading depends on somebody else not doing so well, right? And in spite of that, at least when we were at IIT, one person had the best class notes. I was in a mechanical engineering class of 72 students. There was one guy whose handwriting was brilliant and he could take amazing notes, right? And everybody photocopied his notes, right? Do you guys still have that, or you guys are more advanced? What is the technology? Same thing? Same thing? You all are dependent on one person? 2 people, yeah. So we had one person who took all the notes and everybody photocopied the notes. We would run here, and then there'll be 10, 12 people sitting together and discussing how to attack the exam the next day. And the concepts go till 3, 4 in the morning, but punctuated by any number of trips to Tarams for SPT. Is that SPT still a thing? SPT is specialty. which is basically a lot of sugar, but suited you well at the middle of the night. But there was such a lot of camaraderie. Here you were competing and yet you were collaborating, right? So that is in some sense a great, great virtue. And that alone anchors on control what you do, don't worry about the rest, right? So I think like that is sincerely the best part of IIT for me. How you were able to compete while collaborating. I never came across anyone who was trying to be very mean. If somebody was trying to be very mean, they even got a nickname around that, but those are very few. I'm not going to divulge all that because if one of my classmates sees that, I don't want them to feel awkward. And they're all very nice people at the end of the day. But the overwhelming theme was that collaboration that existed. I'll tell you, like, even like this April, like we had a reunion. Last year, we had a reunion. Earlier this week, people from my class who are in India had a reunion. It is just actually fantastic. And we're all connected on the WhatsApp group. It's a relationship that lasts a lifetime. Now, coming back to your point, going to the US, like when I look at people coming from different parts of India and trying to, like figure out a way to coexist, right? It is intrinsically a training of the different value system. Now, when you go to the US, as I did in the mid 90s, again, no internet, pretty much going like fresh off the boat as they call it, like no prior experience with anything, like everything is very strange, right? And I'm not the only one who did this, many people did this. But you find that your ability to socialize, to not be afraid of making new connections, new contacts, there is a human personal element to it. Everything that you do in the hostel, those endless debates, is there something called nothing? It's called the gift of gab. Or do you guys use this word gyan? The gyan that comes so naturally. All these things complete that profile. So you start off with that supposed, like probabilistic advantage because you have studied hard and you have come there. There may be some value to that. But I would argue that equally and possibly more importantly, that ability to come in, like first of all, think about it. All you people are coming through JEE by definition. This is by far one of the most meritocratic institutions in the world. I can't tell you that there is another institution that has as much meritocracy in admissions as IIT does. Plain, pure, simple. You can be the son of the director, the dean, whomever, but unless you clear JEE, you're not going to get into the IIT cohort, right? So the criteria for admissions are very defined, and you get in only in a particular way. So you come in with a group of people that are just as competitive, driven, motivated, maybe more, right? Some of them may have better JEE ranks, some of them may have worse JEE ranks, but at some point it doesn't matter. You're not intimidated, and you begin to flow and be a part of that. I think that's an amazing life lesson. What IIT teaches you is not how to solve the problem, but when the problem is very complex, to last longer and have that persistence to solve that problem. And when the path towards that is sitting in your hostel rooms. Do you guys still do group studying and all that? I mean, life is very boring without that. So those virtues, they stand the test of time. In the same thing in the workplace, they call it intellectual curiosity. They call it teamwork, right? They call it communication skills. So I think those are all facilitated. When you come into a highly, highly rigorous program with highly motivated students and you find a way to collaborate, it's an excellent training ground. And again, anchor on that, focus on yourself, not what the LinkedIn profile says about the dog that barks or the person that's about to become the world's greatest, whatever, right? So does that answer your question? What's next?
You are working with Marex, which I just searched. There's some financial problems, you provide solutions for the
Right.
hedging right now. So what kind of hedging like you are specifically in bond side or some other methods you use?
So to answer that question is very complex because how much do you know about hedging as an example?
I started exploring it like a month ago. So
Okay. I started exploring it about 5 years ago and I'm still exploring. But let's kind of get to a simple point. I also want to make sure that these questions are thematic, so I'm going to try and take your thing and make it thematic, right? So the key thing is, what I'm going to take from your question is, what type of problems do we solve? And try to make it more broad-based in a way that hopefully is still directive, but staying true to the spirit of your question. So you have farmers, right? Farmers will sow their corn seeds and wait for corn to grow. And that can take 9 months before that corn grows. Same thing with soybeans, wheat, whatever, right? And you can say the same thing about coffee, cocoa, any of these many things. Same thing with fuel companies. I'm going to refine, I'm going to drill some oil, and then refine it, produce different distillates. There is a lead time, right? And the price of all these commodities is intrinsically volatile. It changes. Can you predict the price 8-9 months down the line? You can't. On the flip side, if I'm making cereal, the cereal that you eat for breakfast, right? I need to know how to price that box of cereal 9 months out. So if the price of corn is volatile, I don't know how to price that box of cereal. And if I'm a company, I want the stability of profits. So what the farmers will do, just to simplify, is if I'm long wheat or soybeans, they'll hedge themselves by going and selling on the exchange in the futures market. So that way, if the price of the physical goes up, they are benefiting one leg or the other. So they give up a little bit of the upside in order to stabilize their P&L. If you're a consumer on the other side, you go and buy that right away. So if your price goes up, you have benefited from the futures. So that kind of offsets your physical thing. That's really the concept of commodities hedging. You can then take it to the equities, fixed income side, where people again are going to be exposed, investors for instance, like your long equity funds or your hedge funds, they go long short. They're all similarly doing a range of those types of activities. So what we do is, for a whole range of people, same thing I can say about energy, producers and consumers of metal, and then like people who want to buy and sell equities. What we do is, anybody who wants to connect to an exchange, we provide all those market services. And along the way, we do have a team that basically looks at correlation between different asset classes and comes up with a sensible strategy in terms of helping. If a client wants to sell, say, 100,000 barrels of crude oil, and then we have a team that also looks at market correlations and those types of patterns to see how can we facilitate those types of client activity when a market does not immediately exist also. So I know I threw a lot of jargon at you, but all I want you to know is, my company, we are in the financial markets, but we are enabling all these transactions happening. Are you in the QFR program? Are you in the quantitative financial research program? No? Okay. I thought you would be. So that's what we do. Now, how do we then solve? That's the crux of the question. All my background aside, I think the story of Marex is very interesting in its own right. I used to work for Goldman Sachs. I used to work for JPMorgan. These are arguably the two biggest financial institutions, right? And then I came to Marex in July 2020, which was, what was happening in July 2020? COVID. I joined Marex not having met anybody in person. So all my interviews were virtual. So I joined Marex. I figured, you know what, it's a pretty interesting opportunity. You know, the one thing that my job description had, like, they were looking for the CEO of the Americas. And if I went back and looked at the job description, like what they look for an ideal candidate, what do you think they required by way of, I'm going to recollect. What are some of the attributes you think they would have asked for in the advertisement for my job?
Ambition.
Sorry?
Ambition.
How do you measure ambition though?
Seeing how far someone has come given the starting point.
A career growth. Nobody explicitly says that. That's a part of the interview selection process. But think about the job application, the job posting. They'll tell you need some number of years of work experience. We're not going to bring a new kid out of IIT to be the CEO, even though this kid might be the smartest kid in the world, because you need some gray hair, some whatever. So work experience, yes. What else do you think they say?
Job description for a CEO might be that you need to work 20 hours a day for a long stretch.
20 hours a day for a long
For a
stretch?
CEO in USA, that might be a benefit.
They don't tell you that, right? They don't tell you that. I've done, by the way, like when I was in investment banking, I worked for 4 days at a stretch with virtually no sleep. And my MD was like, "Are you taking some substance?" I'm like, "No, I'm just driven by adrenaline. I've never taken any enhancers except caffeine." But yeah, they don't explicitly say that. So the thing about being the CEO or being any senior person is, you don't really look at it in terms of how many hours you should work. It's like you just have to do whatever it takes, right? And so, I want you to come back and prod me. I have some other thought that I want to, like elaborate on. But what do you think my job description had? Yeah. Some managing experience. Sorry?
If you only have like technical experience, you cannot really apply for this.
So it had like managing experience, and the way they do it is by saying, in my case, what they said was, ability to have worked in a matrix environment. Do you know what a matrix environment is? Sorry? It's complicated only because you have like a product owner, you have a head of Asia, head of equities. So like, are you reporting, you have to kind of manage the head of Asia, the head of equities, and then the head of the clients, and you have to make everybody work harmoniously, right? You can't have each one pulling you. So that was definitely there.
I have experience of 2008 crisis.
That was not actually there, because I think that comes again through that's not a bad thought, but many people lived and died for no fault of theirs, right? So actually, let me pivot. What was one thing? The job said something is not required. It was very explicit in saying something was not required. What could that be? Sorry? But I mean, like, it doesn't, it's like, they would say philosophy not required either. So engineering, what did they say? What was the one thing they said not required? Sorry? No, they actually said you needed a college degree in this case. But it's an interesting question, right? The world is trending towards what is the use of a college degree, which is why it goes to the point, what are we getting out of a college degree?
I think they would have asked, like, don't need to have financial background.
Don't need to have financial background. Interesting. So you think they're going to give me a job in financial services with no need to have financial background? Sorry?
Weird question.
Weird.
No, I put it weird.
You put it weirdly? How many of you think that he put it weirdly?
No, I don't think so. Because there are some issues where you get a job without any management. Because the way you gave those answers, they find you quite apt for the position.
It explicitly said, your answer is actually not weird. Your answer is actually correct. It explicitly stated, knowledge or prior experience in this line of work is not required. It almost went and said knowledge or expertise is not required. And they went and very specifically stated, I had never done this prior to this job. This line of, even though I'd been in financial services, I was in investment banking, where I made beautiful looking pitch books, right? Well formatted, neat, nice. That's supposed to be a joke. Then I also did asset management, where one of the things which was a highlight of my tenure, like was said in the introduction, was launching a very innovative product in India, which is the highlight of my career as well. And then this one with the markets orientation, I had zero knowledge prior to taking on this job. But I'll tell you something else. When I was at Goldman for about 9-10 years. By any count, I did 6 or 7 different jobs at Goldman. They kept moving me from here to there, to there, to here, to there, to here. Not all the time was because I said, hey, I need to move on. They kept changing my jobs. Same thing at JPMorgan. A little bit more stable, but I still had different role evolutions at JPMorgan. And then I come to Marex, and the story of like how I came to Marex itself was very interesting. When I was at JPMorgan, I was very interested in commodities, and I remember I used to work with Volkswagen on their payments infrastructure. So when they had come to New York once, right, and I was hosting them, so all these people came from different teams, and they were talking about hedging metals, hedging interest rates, all these things. And I was listening to that, and I'm like, damn, wouldn't it be so cool if I could be doing this? And then my next thought was, I don't think I'm going to be able to do that because I've been on the banking side of the house the whole time, right? And then fast forward to like around March or April of 2020, I get this inbound call from a recruiter saying like, hey, we want you to think about doing this particular job. And my first reaction was, what was my first reaction? Any guesses? I don't have any experience. Maybe you need somebody else, and I will try and see who in my network will be well suited. And then that Sunday night, I'm watching Anthony Bourdain, Paths Unknown. Has any of you seen that? He goes to, it's actually, if you get it on YouTube, check it out. He goes to different parts of the world. He explores the food, right, in different parts of the world, and he makes some deep philosophical comments. And then it hit me. Damn, I had opportunity come knocking at the door. This is the job I wanted. Somebody came and asked me, hey, we think you're good. And what did I do? I told them, not me, I'll find somebody else. Suddenly, like Sunday night, I remember 8 to 9 was that program. At 9 o'clock, I started writing that email to that recruiter. I was thinking, you know what? I already told him no. Why would he even listen to me, right? So I also started writing to him and then telling him why I think they're better off taking it. It was a deep exploration. Came up with that. And then the rest of the process is what it is. So sometimes we have our own dissonance. We have our own aspiration, but we don't even, but when it comes knocking in its own form, this is exactly the type. When I was in that Volkswagen interview, sitting for 2 days, what Marex does is exactly what I wanted to be doing. And I told myself, but I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to get to do it. Why? Because I thought knowledge was a prerequisite to do something different. And when somebody came and told me knowledge is not a prerequisite, I let my own blinders come before what they stated, right? And that's almost 6 years ago to the date, right? So what I'll tell you is the regret of omission is, and by the way, even as I was looking at this, I knew nothing about it. It's COVID. I had a very good, stable job at JPMorgan. I could get a paycheck. I had kids. I had expenses. I had like my aspirations of savings account and all that. And this was a very, very small company at that time. Not even 100 people in the US, 60, 70, 80 people. Not even $100 million top line, smaller than that probably. Barely break even. And now I'm like going to take a risk. Going from JPMorgan, where like I had 7, 8 years of experience at that point, comfortable, I can think of living another 10 years, retiring happily and all that. And now, and then COVID on top of that, right? How many of you think at that time that was an easy choice to make? No knowledge, right? And that is again where like your fundamentals of where you are. Like when you go and study, do you have physics 3 by the way? Quantum physics? Do you guys do physics 3? We used to have a professor that used to be, she was the nicest person, always wished the class that everybody would get higher than the class average. So, you know, so, but physics 3 was all the quantum physics, it was painful. How many of you survived? So do you guys have quantum physics as a part of your core curriculum?
I'm an old quantum physicist.
Okay.
Sorry.
Schrodinger's equation, wave equation. How many of you have dealt with that? Are you a physics professor in IIT Madras?
Well, I used to be at Math Science.
Okay.
I'm a distinguished professor in physics.
Okay.
By Roma.
Okay. Smart man. I used to have like, I used to sweat bullets before some exams. Physics was one of those. Physics, I did all right in the end though. But you guys don't have quantum physics? Do you guys have like fitting? You still do that? They give you a block like this, and you have to file it, and then like, is Guptan still here? He's still here? Guptan puts a T-square and says, I can have an elephant go through this, and flings the block and gives you another big block. Anyone survived all that? I mean, those are all like life's experiences. He'll tell you, like, don't look under that wooden plank you're standing on. Underneath you'll see blood, sweat, and like all of those things. It's, if you have not even cleaned it. The first day when you come on campus, you'll even believe it, you know. So all those types of varying things. But fast forward, this opportunity came at me. I didn't think I had the prerequisite. The job description said it is not required. And then I'm listening to this Paths Unknown program, and that's where they say the fear of failure, the regret of failure is much less than the regret of not having tried. The regret of failing in something will never be as bad as the regret of not having tried. The regret of omission is always going to be a much bigger regret than the regret of commission, trying something and letting it fail, right? So that kind of came through, and then again, like, oh, should I write it? I already told this guy, what is he going to think of me? What do I have to lose? Too many times you want to, and the key thing is you always want to keep building optionality. Went through a process, very rigorous process, and I would say that I've been very fortunate to have nothing but phenomenal experiences wherever I worked, but these last 6 years have been absolutely brilliant. Small firm has grown very nicely in a very, it's not like we are an AI firm, which is like now the talk of the town. We partake in activities that are like very, like that's been there for a long time, dominated by the big banks, find our own niche, and grow to be of decent, good size. It's a London headquartered company, and now the US in particular has become the majority of the revenues, right? And we went public in the US in 2024. Again, not in something like AI or space technology and all that, in a very traditional, you know, like, I say boring, but not in a derogatory way, in a very steady type of business model, dominated by the big banks, found our own niche, and grew to be of size. And that type of experience required a little bit of that risk taking. So the first time I took risk was to say, I'm not going to be a consultant and I'm going to be an investment banker. 20 hours a day, 100 hours a week routine. Like, how do you go into an industry where there's not too many people like you at that point in time? Today, and even then it didn't honestly matter. It simply does not matter, because when you get to it, human beings are just that, right? When you go and mingle, one of the best things about being in the US is you will get to see the universality of our human aspirations, right? You will start viewing the world from a wave standpoint rather than a particle standpoint. You will see the world as a continuum, a probabilistic continuum. I'm butchering your knowledge of physics, so apologies for that. But you'll see the world in a continuum of wave-related probabilistic orientations, which brings it all together in some way, shape, or form, rather than discrete entities. If we are all eventually motivated by the same set of things. How much we commit towards that motivation, that's the question. So far, so good. Temperature check. Still with me? These guys have not done this. Should we fire them and appoint some other people? By show of hands, how many of you want to change of guard?
I'm very curious to see what is equilibrium equation, which one you are talking about.
I'll come to that in a minute. I'll come to that. That's a very good question. So you guys are still very popular here for some reason. Okay, you are giving me a thumb up. But if at some point, like, you know, you guys want to, don't blame me, it's those three guys. Okay, it's not me. You guys have, does everybody know their names and hostels and all that?
No.
Okay, just talk to them afterwards. Okay, so where do we go from there? I'm going to postpone my equilibrium equations to the last question of the order. Because
What was the exciting or the very exciting? So you didn't work, even then you worked.
It was a small company, it was entrepreneurial. It gave me an opportunity to get into something that I really wanted to understand. Like I had never done that previously. It was a brand new thing. So I was intellectually curious. I also felt like it is an ability to build the US. The company had decided that the US was, like the most, was strategic. The depth and the size of it. The US is actually, when you look at the finance, it's such a dominant place for innovation, for growth, for the depth of the capital markets, right? And every passing year, I only find that being strengthened, notwithstanding what you may read in the popular press, de-dollarization, this, that. You can knock your socks off talking about it, but the opportunity to grow this, the vision that they had growing this through acquisitions, integrating those acquisitions, coming up with new product opportunities, competing with the big banks. I spent my entire career working for the big banks, right? To go into a different mindset. And fundamentally, it could be a risk. I could have not done well. My firm could have not done well. But that is the point where I really, really said to myself that, you know what, I don't care that I have 2 kids whose college bills I still have to pay. I don't care that I still don't have the savings profile that I need. But I want to be able to do that. What I'll tell you is, as you are all getting ready to graduate, okay, it is never too early to be an entrepreneur, and it is just as much never too late to be entrepreneurial, right? The one thing I'm going to be saying something as a stereotype. If I'm right, take it. If I'm wrong, challenge me. I think in our culture, we do not reward risk-taking and failure enough. The one thing about the US culture is, when you pursue something and you fail at it, and if you learn the right lessons, it's actually viewed as a strength. It's like this. This might be a bad advice I'm about to give you. If you never got a speeding ticket, you have been driving way too slow for your whole life, right? So if you have never failed, you should be a little bit scared about that. In a very conventional way, I've not failed. And I'm scared about that. The people that get failures early on are the ones who probably ascend and do bigger things and better things in the long run. So more than the fact that you got into IIT and that you had that staying power, that risk-taking ability and that willingness, I think, in my opinion, multiple views can exist. In my opinion, that has a long-term positive effect. So for me, coming to Marex, like going into investment banking and doing investment banking at one of the big banks was a risk-taking, but I still controlled it. As long as I worked hard, as long as I did the right things, I could build that, right? So Marex was the next real frontier. Again, even with Goldman coming to India and all that, it presented a number of challenges. But when you work for a big firm, you're still somewhat protected. And Marex was the next level of risk. So what I'll tell you is, if there is one thing that you take away from this whole conversation, and if there is only one thing that you take away, it is just this point. The fear, the regret of not having tried, will always be more than any regret of failure. If there is just one thing you take away from this whole topic, that is what you take. You take your intellectual foundations, you take the breadth of your experience, the gyan, the gab that you have accumulated at IIT. IIT's classrooms and the hostel teaches you how to survive, how to adapt. What IIT does not teach you, and in some ways may actually diminish, is risk-taking. Again, each of you think for yourselves. How many of you were proud the day you got into IIT? You were not proud? You were not proud? Why were you not proud? Not so much. You are matter of fact like that. You are evolved. Very nice. You were proud about like having gotten into IIT, right? But how many of you were happy in terms of what it projected to you, to others? Your neighbors, your friends, your family, even your own parents. How many of you took some positive validation from that? Can I tell you that when I used to take 47A, the bus, from T Nagar to IIT, and I would buy a ticket, and the conductor would ask, "Enga pono?" IIT Madras, IIT, and everybody would give that look, right? I felt good in 47A, in that bus, right? Free gratification. How many of you had that similar feeling? See, some of us are actually, that can be an impediment. You have to gauge for your own self. Are you here to please others? Are you here to create that perception to please others? Because what does that do? What does that do?
More expectation.
More expectations of
Doing better.
being successful. What is the flip side? What is the corollary to that? Yeah, you have to preserve and protect the identity of being a successful person. It avoids risk taking. You don't want failure. Sorry? You don't even become complacent. You'll be hardworking the whole time. But you become an assembly line product. I went to IIT. After IIT, I went to IIM. Look at me now. And then I went into pick your favorite job. Look at me now. So what are you doing? You're becoming an assembly line product. Do you know a good assembly line product like that? I could be a very good example of an assembly line product, right? Where you follow very prescribed path. Everywhere you have plentiful validation. Everybody is telling you how brilliant you are, how committed you are, how good you are. And then meanwhile, that one kid that didn't get into IIT, that probably didn't even bother going to college, is like saying, you know what, I'm going to go try something on my own. I'm going to start whatever. And then you end up in an ecosystem like you have in Tamil Nadu, where people that are completely uneducated are the ones that own colleges, right? So that is the thing that you have to really, really watch out for. Does that make sense? So what I will tell you, and the other trap, everybody says, I need to get an MBA to do a management job. How many people feel that way? How many people? There are only one, two, handful, just two people. How many of you feel like in order for me to do like a quantitatively rigorous job for a hedge fund, I need to do advanced something? Yeah, you have to. But what I'll tell you is, you may be right. In 80% of the time, you may be right. But if you think you know what your next step is, don't tell yourself that there is a precursor to that. Try it already and keep trying for that already, right? You don't need an MBA really to become a manager. You don't need an MBA to, much of what MBA does is something that you can acquire on the job. Now, if you want to go get an MBA, like in my case, the MBA made sense because it allowed me to switch from engineering into a proper finance role on Wall Street. But be very, very surgical about it. Right? So take risk and don't put yourself into a trap of, I need to be doing this in order to get there. Does that make sense? But that's what all the IIT students have to watch out. You all know to your own selves how much of a crowd pleaser each of you were. I was a crowd pleaser, right? I loved it when people came and said, like, what a good this, what a good that. High GPA, high everything, blah, 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 blah. But if you look at the long arch of life, I will tell you that, IIT positions you to be very, very successful. People that go to IIT, they do well. You almost have to, at some point, say, fall off the grid to not do that. All these are general comments, so not to say 100% there. But people that don't go to IIT also do really well. So this is, I don't know, necessary, sufficient, that's your parlance. You can say what it is, right? So, but the one important compliment, I think, don't underestimate the value of your hostel life. It has its own important societal construct that it gives you for the long run. Don't underestimate the power of collaboration with your classmates. It teaches you a very important skill to be successful in the workplace. But what you don't get here, and what you probably are somewhat disadvantaged by coming here, is that ability to take risk and that fear of failing. So be cognizant of that blind spot and go beyond those validations that you're collecting. That's something that if I were to reflect on, I don't regret my career choices, to be honest. I really enjoyed everything that I did. But if I had this perspective, I might have done something differently at some point in my time. I may not have started with investment banking. I might have gone into trading, for instance, which is a very good way to apply your engineering, math acumen into this. Who knows? I don't know. I can't go back into my head 20 years ago, and I don't need to. So far, so good. These things have not happened so far. What else?
What made you transition from Goldman to JPMorgan?
So it's actually an interesting question. Goldman and JPMorgan are both very, very, very good firms, each in their own right. When I was at Goldman, it was much more of a boutique investment bank that was building out a universal banking model. JPMorgan, on the other hand, they have Chase that caters to retail. It is a bigger bank altogether. So I had actually had an offer to join JPMorgan for a few times, even before I actually went in, at least one other time before. So I had an offer from JPMorgan in 2011, right? But at that time, even though JPMorgan said, hey, we will take you in as a managing director and all that, I had the opportunity to come to India to build the asset management business in India, which was very intriguing for me. So I turned down that opportunity to go to JPMorgan with a big increase in comp and a bigger title than I had. Also, it was important for me to know, having spent how many ever years, 7 years at Goldman at that point, it was important for me to know if I would make MD that year. I didn't want to just go and get an MD title at another arguably prestigious institution, right? But also the curiosity of coming to India and building out Goldman's asset management franchise in India. At that time, emerging market, BRIC was coined actually by an economist at Goldman. That was all exciting. So I said, JPMorgan, I love you, but I want to stay back to see what this opportunity is and whether I'll make MD. Again, a slight variation of the risk I took. Nothing material, right? And I came here, the most fantastic experience. So frankly, like when I came with Goldman to India, I found that the asset management industry in India was 80% money market funds. Do you guys know what money market funds are? Okay, this is like basically supposed to be your safest investment. Technically considered to be the most boring, right? In most of the rest of the world, they invest only in very safe instruments. But in India, they compete, they invest, they take a little bit more risk in order to improve the yield, in order to improve the returns. Goldman said you can't do that. Our policy is same across the world. So you have to have only one product, right? One single product. And we became the lowest yielding product in the Indian market overnight. There were 41 funds. We went from 10 to 41. 80% of the market is money market funds, and we have the lowest yield in that. And I moved my whole family to Bombay at that point, 2-year commitment. My salary was in Indian rupees. The Indian rupee went from 45 rupees a dollar to 65 rupees a dollar 1 month after I moved, right? Like everything compounded. So that is when what we did was, we came upon a very interesting opportunity. It talks about the innovation component. Like in India, the government of India would divest in a public sector enterprise. And when they did that, you'll have all these shorting. There are people who would go and spread some whatever negative news about the company, drive the price of the stock down, buy the stock at a discounted price, and after they buy it, the news will go away and the stock will go up. So the government was losing a lot of money. So we came up with an idea that, hey, instead of putting one company at a time, create a basket, call it an ETF. It's called CPSC ETF, Central Public Sector Enterprises ETF. We put the Navratnas into that. We created a retail component. So we said, like, you know what, some of this will be sold to retail, and if a retail holds on to it for 1 year, they'll get a 6% dividend just for holding it for 1 year, right? So we basically created a campaign that says the government of India is giving the Navratnas back to the people of India. But for any ETF, which was very underdeveloped at that time, you need institutional, big institutions like LIC coming into this. But in India, you have IRDA, you have EPFO, and you have SEBI. Each of them is their own regulator, and one LIC can only buy IRDA approved products, cannot buy SEBI's products. ETFs had a 25 basis point high securities transaction tax that made it very, very unviable. That's where I saw the best of Goldman. Many people from different parts of the world came together, actively educated the government about this structure. I mean, I'm not even claiming credit for being that, but I was there along with a number of people. We developed the distribution channels. I came in as the franchise head for Goldman at that time in India. But the number of people who drove this, people with local expertise and knowledge, people that came from Hong Kong and Singapore to talk about the experience in other markets, people that flew from New York to speak to the corridors of, I think they called it Lyons or whatever the building, Lutyens building in Delhi, which is where the number of people who spoke with the finance minister, all these people. So we got the LIC to buy this product. We got SEBI to change a number of rules to make it consistent with the international framework. We got the securities transaction tax reduced from 25 basis points to 0.000025 basis points, all of which made it, and just in about 18 months, this product was launched and was very successful. It happened in India in 2013, 2014 vintage. And then, of course, like others jumped into it, and Goldman eventually sold it to Reliance, who I think runs this product. That happened after I left. But that's when I moved from Goldman to JPMorgan, because we had a good time here. I wanted to go back. And now I want to do a different part of the banking. I want to try to do something different. And JPMorgan had that in their franchise. So I said, you know what, let me go try it out. And Goldman was very accommodative, very nice, because I was also going to a completely different side. And so when I was transparent with my managers at Goldman, hey, I'm looking at this opportunity, all that, that transparency actually helped me, because there were really no hard feelings there at that time. But I hope I encapsulated a lot of themes about innovation when you're challenged in the context of the question. You had a question?
Has networking played any part in your?
Oh, networking is the most important thing. Your peers are going to be your greatest assets. And eventually, I can't tell you, like, for instance, for me, like, when I first got out of Wharton, I was actually at Bank of America. The person who, and I had interviewed at Goldman, my interview went very well, but I liked some people at Bank of America, all that, whatever stuff. But when I wanted to re-enter Goldman in the full-time program, it was my classmate at Wharton who actually set me up for that. Similarly, it was an IIT hostel mate who set me up at JPMorgan, who made the introduction for me at JPMorgan. He's a very prominent guy these days, and even at JPMorgan. So these are all like, this peer network that you have is extremely important. That's why when you go to a party, take care not to throw up on their floors. It's better for you to be boring and solve a problem, because you don't want your best friend to think of you as like just a party animal and not very much else. I mean, that's an oversimplification. You do you, but networking, especially amongst your peers, is by far the most important thing. And then like right now, like it's like that network is also accessible for our families, for our kids. In the last trip that I went, funnily, one of my friends said, hey guys, I have 2 boys. If any of you has a willing daughter to connect them, like you even get this whole Hinge. Is Hinge a thing here in India? Do you guys know Jodi 365? It is founded by one of my classmates from IIT Madras who lives in Madras. I gave him a free shout out. So it's amazing how much this networking matters. So you can even get your son or daughter 25 years down the line networking with the son or daughter of like whomever else. So it's very powerful. Don't underestimate the power and the prowess of this network. True life experience, by the way. These are all not made up stories. Yes?
As a CEO, what kind of leadership style you follow? Is it changed over the period of your campus?
Yeah, what type of leadership style, and has it changed over time? Yes, I think like, look, one of the things that I really follow is a very non-hierarchical leadership style. Now, there are people who tend to be very hierarchical, and there is a value to that, but I like a culture where everybody is able to opine and contribute. One of the nice things about my firm is if you go to some of the bigger institutions, if you're an entry-level person, they put you in a box and they tell you sing and dance within this box. That's something that we don't do in my firm. Everybody, regardless of, like we have a risk call every morning where we are going through some important risk matters. Everyone all the way up to the chief risk officer of the firm, the head of a couple of products, global. Then the US heads are there, as also are very junior people in their 20s, early 20s. And sometimes they're asked to speak up and give their views. Because sometimes like you can never put a minimum age requirement for where good ideas come from. That's another thing. Always feel free to. So one thing I wish I would have done differently is speaking up, not being quiet. Sometimes the system might force you to play in that lane, but if you're confident, express yourself, right? Never be one that is shy to express yourself. So I like a non-hierarchical structure. I'll tell you this, last Wednesday, I do a check-in with people in my company. So I decided to bring in people like 2 to 5 years from college, just to check in and see how things are going. We are a small company. We ask a lot of our junior people. They contribute immensely, so we are very much tuned to them. There were about 15 people in the room in New York, right? I knew almost every single person by name and what they do. And even they did not know each other. The most anyone in that room knew was 5 people. And I knew pretty much, there were probably 20 people. I knew every single person. I mean, but it's also difficult. I don't view that as an objective all the time, right? And this is in New York. We have offices all across the country. But it's important. When you operate in a certain ecosystem, you want to do that. What I'll say is that everybody that works in your organization is there to add some value. Recognize them. And when you recognize them, when you motivate them, I think you take this organization to a much, much better, an organization in which people feel appreciated. And sometimes that appreciation is by knowing their name, knowing something about them, and knowing what they do, and why it is important that they do what they do. So that's at least one thing that I personally try to inculcate. The rest of it, like, the next speaker will tell you that, and the previous speaker would have already said that. But this is one thing that I'm more attentive to. You also have to make sure that your governance functions have their due, like the control functions, like the risk, the legal, the compliance. You're not only driven by business growth. You need to make sure that you're growing in with all the right framework, right parameters, right? Have you basically abided by all those hygiene factors? The quality of your growth is as important, if not more important, than the quantum of your growth, right? So at least those are two things that I'll tell you that I'm always tuned towards.
So, like, would you link it with that first principle to lead in unsettled world?
Yeah, I think the first principles to lead an unsettled world, it's definitely that, right? What is the value of bringing somebody that went from IIT Madras and then telling them, just sit there and don't? So you want to maximize the intellectual contribution that you get from people. So I would say that everything that I've told you, right, taking the risk, innovating to solve a problem, like the experience I described at Goldman, you could pretty much have packed and said, 80% of the market is money markets, I'm condemned to be the lowest return on that, we are done, let's move on. But we found a problem that, like, so the one thing I'll say is that, and this is another part that has defined my experience in many places, especially at JPMorgan, but also at Goldman. Many a time when you sell something, you have your fancy solution, and you're going and selling and saying, hey, this is a shiny toy, you should buy it. But a better approach is, what is the problem or the pain point that your customer, that your constituent is having? How do you solve for that pain point? So that's one thing that Marex, as a company, we do very well. As a small company, our innovation is to solve the pain point of our clients. When you solve something that they don't get from their established players, right? That is how we kind of differentiate ourselves. We are very nimble in solving a client problem. So what do the clients do? You solve a complicated problem for them. Then they come and give you the plain vanilla business that they would otherwise give it to the biggest of the banks. So yeah, so those are like, so from the risk taking that I talked to you about, the non-hierarchical nature that brings in the best minds all around, the innovation, like when you feel like the opportunities are close, finding that white space, solving a client problem, that's innovation that is purposeful, right? It's not innovation which is for the sake of innovation. I think these are all some of the elements that come to that. I still have to answer her question on equilibrium equation. Now you are bringing to tie-in. Is that your way of gently telling those people, hey, it's time for you to do this? Those guys have not done that, right? They still seem to be very content. Yes? How do I define my college experience from here to master's? I'll tell you, this is a very funny question that you raise. So I go to Ohio State for my master's in engineering. My very first class, I had to do a math class. It was linear algebra, matrices. You had done plenty of matrices at IIT through your whole time. And I also had a Malayali professor with a very strong, like, what is the nickname that you guys use for Malayalis? Mallu? I think we also used to call something else, but with a very strong Mallu accent. Very strong, okay? This is the first professor welcome to America for me. Linear algebra, I'm like, you know what? I went to IIT Madras. I'm so smart. Why do I need to worry about this class? Indian guy, Indian professor, who cares? The first exam, the quiz that I took, when he gives me the paper, he hands it to me and says, typical IIT arrogance. And he gives it to me, okay? I did not do as well as all the other people in the class did in that class, okay? So that is my very first introduction. What I realized when I went to Ohio State was the importance of work ethics. I may have gotten through a fancy JE, which is arguably the hardest exam in the world, but what I found amongst my peers, when I went to Ohio State was these people. That was also a class which had undergrads, by the way, right? So they were still going through their first year, second year, whatever undergrad curriculum. What I realized was the work ethics. They were paying for their education. I had a scholarship, I had a fellowship. I just pretty much believed that, like Ohio State is so lucky to have me, right? So they gave me a fellowship, they gave me all this. I came from IIT Madras, so I have to be smart. It's linear algebra, it's determinants and matrices. I've done that since high school, so who cares? But you realize that there is something called being in that moment, not taking anything for granted, and living up to that. What I saw at Ohio State amongst the classmates that I had was an amazing sense of work ethics. These guys would have probably not cleared the JE. Very few people would clear the JE unless you practice for that specifically, right? But that's what it is. You have native intelligence, but you have to really, really practice for that exam in order to get through that exam. That means you have to have work ethics. You can't take anything for granted, right? And that was a lesson, thankfully, I learned very quickly within one quiz. So what Ohio State taught me was the value of work ethics. Now, I told you I went to a community college, right, to do like some finance, accounting. The classmates that I had in the community college were anyone from a 60-year-old woman to students that were just, like not the best of GPAs, and they were trying to use it as a stepping stone to get into a proper college. Again, the same thing, the work ethics, the commitment, how prepared they were, right? And that is where I realized your innate intelligence takes you so far, but that being systematic about it, determined about it, motivated, it can take you even further. And I was actually blown away by all these people. I mean, some of my classmates at the community college were grandmothers. The last time they studied was I don't know how many years prior. And yet when you sat in an accounting class, accounting is really about the discipline of following through and knowing what the rules are and doing that, right? You could be like a quantum physics expert, but if you don't have that discipline in that accounting, you're not going to get through that. So I learned that in the community college. When I went to Wharton, I was surrounded by people who had a prior pedigree in accounting and economics and finance and all of those things. They had done their undergraduate in business. I was not intimidated by that. I went into all the accelerated classes in stats, accounting, and finance. Stats at Wharton is extremely difficult, even for any IIT grad. But I directly went into pre-term to place myself out of those boring core classes. They're not boring, they're foundational. You can do it over the full semester, and they provide that. But they also give you the option, if you have done this before, right, you can take a test, you can go through an accelerated program even before the term starts and plays out of that. What it means is it frees you up to take more interesting classes. So I was not intimidated by that rigor, but it was very stressful. The 1 month, you have 3 classes, 4 classes that you're just grinding to, like economics, accounting, finance, stats. 4 classes the first month before you get into preterm. All your friends are networking, they're getting to know each other, they're going to parties. And you're grinding day in, day out, day in, day out. Why? Because by placing out of these classes, you can free up the credits to do something more interesting, exciting. But what also came about was, when I'm applying for investment banking jobs and competing with people who had been in finance before, the fact that I had placed out of those classes and I finished on the dean's list and all that was a powerful signaling thing, right? So I think the big thing about my whole education experience was really understanding the importance of work ethics. In IIT, I don't know, like there is a part of what we are good at, which is we prepare to beat the system. Is that fair? A part of what we learn to do here is to beat the system. Is there anyone who agrees, disagrees with me? And that's a smart thing. We don't need to feel, but we don't beat the system in unscrupulous ways. We beat it by knowing what the questions is, anticipating that, all of those types of things. So we are almost surgically trying to be efficient in a certain way all the time. But every once in a while that work ethics matters. Does that help? Is that what you're looking for? Anything else? What is the equilibrium equation? Is there something called an equilibrium equation?
We do learn in economics. I'm not sure if you're.
Yeah, there is Nash equilibrium, and there is like when you look at, see, I think all physical systems, right? If you ignore the construct of entropy, which is in reality what drives the world, everything is solving a boundary equation problem subject to some set of constraints. And that is the most amount of engineering I can summon at this point in time, right? So you're always solving these types of things, but the real world is very rarely that. So the whole notion of that topic was, how do you, like again, like the way that guy read it, which is what all your problems have precise solutions. They're always going to leverage the fact that you're going to minimize the entropy. Isn't that what everything is supposed to be? And they always go towards like a stable solution, right? But here, like in the real world, you don't even know what the problem statement is. One thing I'll tell you about sometimes being a CEO is not to find the solutions for these problems all the time. You facilitate a lot of people, you coach, you're an advocate, you're an ally for the people that work towards those things. But the more important question is, which problems do you solve, right? That's a far more important thing to pick than to solve the problems. You have a number of talented people, create the right environment, ecosystem, facilitate them and do that. But
I'm saying is that ask the right question.
how do you know what is the right question to pay attention to? What is the core of the matter? What is a distraction? How do you minimize those distractions? Right? A company can spend any amount of money on all these things. So that's what, as I looked at my engineering background and transitioning into my current finance, I thought that would be a nice way to do it. How do you think I came up with that title? Really? Really? ChatGPT, you said? Should I be offended, Sindhu? No? Is that true? Or?
No, that is not true.
That is actually true. So I told ChatGPT to look at my resume, tell them I have to speak in IIT Madras. What would be a good catchy topic? And it came up with that topic. And I was thinking, what the hell is an equilibrium equation? I'm like, you know what? If that question comes up, I can make something up. Did I make it up well? Do you want to see my ChatGPT talks? So that's where that came from. But I think that is the spirit I wanted, nonetheless, of that. So I hope the fact that I went to ChatGPT doesn't take away from anything else that I said, all of which is authentic. This is not a deep fake. This is real me talking. But if you want to think of me as cool, see, I used ChatGPT to come up with a title.
I was about to ask you this. So initially you were mentioning about you did your undergrad here in a very technologically not that much advanced era. And coming from there to here, technology is booming. So in this era, where do you place yourself?
You know, like there is so much of how technology impacts finance. Technology underpins just about everything you do, right? In the US, with this current administration, there is a huge effort to create like digital assets, which includes crypto. That's become a big thing. Tokenization of securities has become a big thing. I know I'm throwing some terminologies at you, so please bear with me and do your own research. But all these mean, like 6 months ago, my company was not planning on operating 24/7. But starting this month, we will have to have a 24/7 coverage to facilitate those trades and transactions that are going to become 24/7, right? So the whole aspect of fintech, which is the interplay between technology and finance, it just is. I can't even begin to tell you like how many ways it impacts. Finance is driven by technology. it actually can enable a greater level of connectivity. It can challenge existing revenue models. It opens up new lanes. And if you're not in that, I mean, and literally I'm telling you, like 6 months ago, nobody talked about all these things, or like 1 year ago, like crypto and tokenization and all these things were not. Blockchain was a big deal 7, 8 years ago, it then went away. It's making a comeback, right? So all that is, so I need to understand that in order to create, at the end of the day, technology needs capital. So that's the role finance plays. An efficient market is effectively something that is equally enabled by technology. So the interconnectedness between technology and finance, technology and healthcare, technology and auto industry exists everywhere, right? But technology has a very similar interconnectedness. Look at like your payments, for instance. Think about like 10 years ago what you had and the whole UPI revolution that's happened in India, right? So technology is at the core. So from my standpoint, how does my mechanical engineering background help anything like this? I think what you'll realize is that, and that goes to the core of this, what you're learning in IIT is not to solve a particular problem. It is a framework of thinking, right? Leveraging people. And unlike in a classroom exam where, you know, like looking at your friend's answer can get you in trouble, in the real world, solving the problems by yourself can get you in real trouble, right? So the world, in the real world, you're rewarded for collaboration. So I think like, again, it goes to many things that I said before, but engineering is a framework of thinking. It's to take a chaotic problem and to decompose it into its stochastic elements. Am I fair in saying that? It's like to take a very uncertain proposition and to do it. Now, other fields of people can also do it. And I do think, by the way, like sometimes there are people, I'm taking Spanish, okay, on the side, going to my classmates were like, after 2 classes, they're like, are you by any chance an engineering background person? And I'm like, why do you ask? Is it because I'm Indian that you think I have to have been an engineer? And they're like, she's like, no, like the way you ask this question, you're synthesizing learning a language into its syntax, right? You're not learning a language in the way of like, I went to a restaurant, I want to order. You're learning a language like saying the way you break it into syntax. So that permeates. So one of the things is for good and for bad, and it is for both good and for bad, I like to dive into the details. Many times that is good, but every once in a while, how much detail do you really need, right? So that's always a balance. So that engineering framework, first of all, you'll realize coming out of it, no problem is too intimidating. No problem should be too intimidating. The ability to collaborate, which you do the day before the exam, hopefully not during the exam, but in the real world that collaboration exists throughout. All these are what I still know Q equals minus K, Ka dt over dx. What do I do with it? I don't know. MC delta T equals convection heat transfer, is that correct? Any mechanical engineers? Only 1, 2, 3. Oh, it's too many, so I'll stop peddling my mechanical engineering equations anymore.
So like, I'm assuming since you worked in JPMorgan, like, why is JP Diamond so famous in city?
Why is Jamie Dimon so famous?
Yeah, I'm assuming that you know it.
I will tell you that when I worked at JPMorgan, the way Jamie Dimon built that firm is, no. I mean, I've interacted with him, but I would be, we have had conversations in group settings, in meeting settings too. But when I left JPMorgan, I don't think Jamie Dimon was like shedding tears that I left JPMorgan. Far from it. But he built a really, like, you know, if you look through his profile of how he started building a Midwestern bank and built a universal banking model that stood the test of the 2008 financial crisis. Now, JPMorgan has had its own number of challenges, but in some sense, he built a very comprehensive bank that leveraged the strength of the different verticals. It's everything from, like the whole retail side, which attracts those deposits from retail. It's transaction banking, which is basically your payments and liquidity management for corporates. It's merchant processing. All of that take the liquidity, which actually helps support their markets and other clients that come for those other activities, provides like financing to clients for other activities, right? And then a very strong advisory presence, strong M&A capabilities. So it's a very good, it's one of the most successful universal banking models, right? So to build a bank of that size with a global presence and with strength in so many categories, and very few people appreciate how difficult it is to change a bank. For instance, to change a bank's technology while you're also running the bank. Like legacy is a good thing, but it can also be a limiting thing. So the way they have adapted is it's a very powerful story in its own right. But then equally, when you go to a firm like Marex, which is very small, right, and we have built it of size, these are two different mindsets. So what is the strength of JPMorgan is something, and then for Marex, which is a small company that has grown through acquisitions of different entities, that has been a very, very different experience. So you can, and that's the journey, the growth that we have had, and the quality of the growth, the strength of our client franchise, right, and the controls that we have, those are all very powerful. Many of those lessons I've learned by virtue of my tenure in the big banks, both Goldman and JPMorgan, applying and adapting them in a different context with the same first principles. You still need to have solid governance. You still need to have good quality growth, or as they say in JPMorgan, first class business in a first class way. Whether you're big or small, those parameters don't change. The one advantage that we have at Marex is we can be more nimble, we can be faster, we can execute quicker. But we cannot do that by compromising the governance, by taking risk that should not be taken. We can be smart by bringing people together. So there are different propositions, and we need to really, really navigate those. So I've had the very good fortune of working in big firms and adapting the lessons into a smaller firm the way it's grown to be of size. Last question. Go. I didn't have Tarams and SPT at Goldman, I'll tell you that. And I didn't like black coffee at that point in my time. That's an interesting question. I think that's a very different. See, don't be scared, because it's a very interesting. When you look at anything from afar, until you are in it, at which point you will find the adrenaline, the enough number of Red Bulls and black coffees. I didn't use Red Bull to survive. And that is what IIT should equip you with. If you could get in here, and if you could operate here, and if you could be here, you should not be intimidated. I just had that situation presented to myself, and I adapted to it when it comes. So too many times we can see, how will I? Do you think I'll be a good surgeon? I think I won't be a good surgeon, but why does it even matter? I'm not a surgeon. Nobody's life depends on me, right? But, I'll tell you, right, my father had a health issue about 3-4 weeks ago, right? And my mother, who's a frail lady in her own right, administered CPR and literally saved him in a way that was damn downright impressive. So when the situation demands, you never know what gets invoked, right? So again, that's the other part of, don't look at LinkedIn to say, oh, that person is so much more successful. Don't look at my 100 hours of week to say, how am I going to do that? When it becomes real for you, I know, I don't even know your name, but I know sure as hell that you have whatever it takes to survive that. And you better believe that. You guys, I'm doing this now. I can only hope that, I don't know what time it is.
Just want to make a short comment.
Yeah.
Thanks to ChatGPT, I came because of the title of the but however, I enjoyed it more. Thank you.
I'm so pleased to hear that. I hope that was not a fake marketing there. It did mean something to me, but thank you all. You guys have been very kind. Your questions have been brilliant, and I really appreciate your giving me 2 hours. When I was in your stage at Godav, I would be worried about the depleting sambar bin. And I would be like, at this point in time, the sambar would have already been gone. The chutney is definitely gone by now. Clearly, you have a lot more food security than I had when I was at IIT. But thank you very much. I really appreciate all of you giving me your time. You have been a very good audience. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So with that, we come to an end for the session. I request Sunita ma'am to present you a goodie.
Oh, I already thought I got a goodie. How many more such lectures can I give if I get goodies? Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Thank you. You should also come in the picture.